Guten Morgen. That's hola, hello. Come on. What's another language? What's another hello? Salom. Heido. Welcome to our very first Jedi Mystery School. The question for you this morning is, what is a mystery? What is a school? And what is a Jedi in the 21st century? My friend Lucien and I were planning the time for today, and he has this game that he's been developing, which we're going to begin at 2. But in the morning, we started talking about a kind of coming out of the closet of consciousness. And I think coming out of the pandemic, the idea that we need new skills to manage the emerging world is really crucial. And so I can kind of think, if we could get another mic for Lucien, I can kind of think some people who, there we go, look, the universe just delivered it. I can kind of think some people that we mutually know who have got us onto this track, but the idea of a Jedi Mystery School has been a little bit mysterious and a little bit obtuse, and certainly hasn't been live streamed to the web that I know of. And I have to preface by saying that neither of us have any authority whatsoever.
We're not initiated.
on this subject. But I still thought it would be fun on our last day to dive into what I call the field of esoterics, which I've been experimenting with, and which I know you have. And it's a little bit emergence, but there's actually technique. And I think what we want to get to is opening people to technique in whatever way we can to help to bring people along whatever path they are on. How do you see this?
Well, I see this as we're really the descendants of many civilizations that have risen and fallen. And mystery schools have been a kind of central part in many of the ancient civilizations before where we are today. To illustrate, the Greeks had the Eleusinian mysteries that was absolutely central to the way they organized their society. And it ran for 2,000 years, almost 2,000 years. The longest running mystery school. And mystery schools there's actually more of them than we know, but they're kept mysteries. And I just felt, chatting with Stan, we were in this amazing place called Damanhur in northern Italy, which is itself really a kind of mystery school. And we were chatting about this, and we were like, you know, there's so many of us that are on the kind of the Davos scene, the WEF scene, the COP scene, these places where people gather to shape the future. There's so many of us that are there kind of hiding the fact that we're there believing really in our whole being that we're never going to address the climate crisis without addressing the fact that we need a shift in consciousness. That they are like one and the same, like as above and so below, as inside us, so outside of us. And so we thought this would be a good conversation, not from any kind of preaching perspective, but really just to open up a conversation to say, how does this resonate with others? Are others feeling that there are parts of themselves when they come to a place like COP or they come to a place like Davos, etc., that you kind of put a part of yourself in the closet and you don't wear that on your sleeve, let's just say. And that actually might be to the detriment of the kind of the story and the emergence. And what if this moment in time really was able to be accelerated if we were to be our authentic selves, and really express some of our direct experiences that we're having? Because for many of us, things like plant medicine transformed our worldview, our perception, our relationship to the external world.
And the relationship between indigenous communities and mysteries is very strong. And in a weird way, it's something that we've, I think, mostly in the Western world lost. So as indigenous communities have acted over the last several years to begin to welcome people who are interested into their world, it's opening up a kind of change within, I think, the relationship between indigenous communities and Western communities, as well as teaching Western communities some very important skills and techniques that, to be honest, we don't really understand very well, but they do. And so we come from a world of process and trying to optimize things. This world is not about process or optimization. It's about experience and feeling. However, I think we can bring something to that with our perspective. And so where I see you and I intersecting with this is trying to figure out ways that we can help other people discover some really amazing things. I mean, some life-changing things. And in a way, the most important things that we could be talking about here at COP. And that's why we put this on the schedule today. It's why we're live streaming. We're coming out of the consciousness closet in a way, but not to be gurus and not to say that we're leaders in any way, because I really think gurudom is a kind of 20th century concept. Somebody said to me, I don't know if it was at Damanhur or somewhere else, it might have been at Spirit Day, this is such an interesting idea. The last wave of enlightenment, the 20th century wave of enlightenment, with the last chakric center of the planet, which we'll talk about planetary chakric centers in a second, was about individual enlightenment. So you think about the Dalai Lama or Tibetan Hinduism, when that was the kind of spiritual center of the world in like the 80s and 70s, 80s, 90s, into this decade. It was about individual enlightenment. Each person went on this journey inside themselves to find enlightenment. Then the center, the chakric center of the world shifted to the Amazon. And it shifted from the high Tibetan plateau to this other continent, and this other place. And in this place, the enlightenment is no longer about individual enlightenment. It's almost expected that individuals have achieved some form of enlightenment through some experience in their life. And once you pass that enlightenment point, it like resets you back to zero. And then the mission becomes a collective enlightenment. And so the mission now for our generation is to achieve your individual enlightenment and then to go and achieve network enlightenment. And then as the networks achieve a form of collective enlightenment, that will accelerate and spiral up. So within Hub Culture, this begins with our team and bringing our closest people towards journeys of enlightenment. And our goal increasingly as a network is to achieve a collective network enlightenment with our network, and then to synchronize our network with other networks, which is why I'm doing this with you, because you have your network and you're doing that work. It's why Jen Sander from Burning Man is going to be up here in a little bit to talk about the great unknown and co-creating future societies. As we sync with that network, it's why Tatiana's down here with Leaders on Purpose. We're syncing with her network And this is a very hub concept, this idea of networks within networks, hubs within hubs. But a lot of my work here at COP has been very actively trying to hold space. I've been doing a lot of talking too, but really trying to energetically hold space to build this container to hold the energy to allow us to synchronize with other networks. And that has been my mission at COP. I think that this is the story of the 21st century, is networks becoming synchronized and enlightened, and using that to push the planet's evolution.
Yeah, it's this notion of the Sangha, that the next Buddha isn't going to be an individual, but is actually going to be a community, a Sangha. And I think this is a really fascinating concept.
Can you define Sangha?
Yeah, essentially community. It's a collective. It's happening at the collective level. And I think I love to look at Jung at this point, I think, who is an amazing kind of prophet, really, where, you know, Jung really teaches us that the individual is a mirror to the collective. And that what we see happen in the, you know, the individual hero's journey, we see happening in the collective quest also. And a dear friend Jamie Wheel, who wrote Stealing Fire, and his latest greatest book is Recapture the Rapture. He positions that you know, the Christos narrative, the Christian narrative. It's not that we're waiting for the second coming of Christ as an individual. The way he interprets that is it's this Sangha, that the second coming is a consciousness that's coming to the collective, and a kind of raising of consciousness. And I often think about this connecting to kind of James Lovelock's theory and Gaia theory, that if we are living on a living system, that Gaia is intelligent, you know, and has whole body intelligence, and that we as individuals are like, I liken ourselves that are kind of the protagonists of this story collectively. We as individuals are like Gaian T cells, you know, like an immune system response that is using consciousness as our like communication channel, like that we are individually all getting insights, all holding pieces of our own puzzle to actually come together to truly deliver this moment. And I personally feel that one of the things that gives us kind of like unfair cooperative advantage is that we can apply a belief in the future that this just continues to increase exponentially, and therefore we can have childlike faith that we've already done it. And I believe that's actually quite possibly the most powerful thing we can have right now, is a collective belief in our own capacity to transform this Titanic of a climate crisis and, you know, frankly kind of cluster of other planetary issues and inequalities and social injustice and, you know, the kind of the pitchfork of institutionalized racism, institutionalized sexism, and like institutionalized serial abuse of our shared planet.
So the way that we were thinking about doing this, I'll give you a little bit of a lay of the land. And it's funny because when we talk about this shared collective, it is about voice, it's about the fifth chakra. So I'm going to use my voice right now to ask Zara to get my phone to amplify Yorgos's Instagram story about the day, because I'm here. And this is a little bit about kind of breaking down the walls between the floor and the stage and the screen. And I see this, this is actually thinking that's just emerged since we've been here at COP, because this is the first time that we've sort of collectively been in a hub for 2 years, and it's been amazing. But I'd like to share a little bit about how we got to where we got to in terms of the energetic field. And in terms of the program, at 11 o'clock, we're going to do a meditation. And so I need Zara to set an alarm for 10:57 so we know to prepare. And we're going to meditate from 11 o'clock Armistice Day. Today's Armistice Day, so that's why people in Britain wear a poppy. And we're going to meditate from 11 to 11:11. So it'll be an 11-minute meditation. We're going to use technique through this session. And the technique is going to start with harmonization. And then we're going to invite you to come and talk for a couple of minutes about a skill that you might have. Because a lot of us have been working on these things, and we're going to invite you to come out of your consciousness closet to share a skill. And then I've put some words up on the screen here, which we can dive into. But here's the first rule of Jedi Mystery School, which I'm just making up right now, is that you have to know the question. Because, and this is something, again, this is another Dominator thing, but if you don't know the right question to ask, you're probably not quite ready for the answer, even if somebody tells you the answer. So it's a sort of weird thing. There's a lot of things we don't know. Most of the things that are out there we don't know. But there's some things that we're feeling around for. And so I think that's part of the process of going through this. But what I can tell you is I think it very much begins with the breath. So I'm just going to invite you guys, even if you're in a meeting, to take a minute to focus on your heart. You can close your eyes. And there's a process to this, so I'm going to walk us through the process. Raise your hand if you're a meditator. Raise your hand if you're a meditator. Yeah, most of you are meditators. Raise your hand if you feel like you have a process for your meditation. Are you the kind of person who follows a process, or the kind of person who sort of experiences your own process of meditation? It's a question to kind of consider. I think both answers are entirely valid, but it's fun to learn meditation techniques from other people. In a little while, we're going to do another meditation, probably between Burning Man at 12 and Jedi Women at 11:30, we're going to do a tree meditation, which is something some of you have done, and it's a really powerful thing. So we're going to mix in little meditations and little experiences around technique. Shall we do our breath? Okay. Where is Lena here? Can you lead us on our breath work? Yeah. So you may have noticed that we have some tools. The tools help us focus frequency. One of them is the gong, which is too close to the wall, so the coherence of the gong has been a little bit extreme. But the sound bowl, if you've had sound healing coming in, has been great. So Lena, can you tell us what a sound bowl is?
Yourself. It's a great way to meditate. So I'm just going to ask you to please close your eyes and start focusing in your breath, taking a deep inhale, and when you exhale, we are all going to connect to each other, saying all together, right? So take a deep breath. All together, exhale. Don't be shy. Inhale, hold it, connection with your breath. Inhaling, being aware of the oxygen that is coming in and is going out, and doing it with an intention all the time. Connecting with your inner universe, trying to listen to all of the answers that are actually inside of you.
Thank you, Lena. We're doing this to set coherence in the room because the energy, we all have an aura, an energetic field that is scientifically measurable. It goes out about 1 to 3 feet from your body. As you take food in and process that food through your body, you create electricity. And that electricity is what keeps your cells functioning and operating in harmony to allow you to speak or move or think. But that energetic field is actually created and emanated from your body. So when you set a coherence in a group, what you're trying to do is kind of set an energetic frequency that is harmonious among the members of the people in that space. So what that work does with the sound is kind of anchor the breath, focus your mind, and it does some actual things to your mind as well, which we can get into. But as I said, we're going to focus on questions. But we have given you some clues, some context clues to the mystery. So if you can figure out where the context clues are in the room, that might give you some guidance for your questions. And if you don't have questions, that's okay too. We will let the next thing emerge. I have a question. How do you feel? We try to make that intentional, and as I said, there are techniques that we're working on that we're trying to learn ourselves to ensure that that happens. One of the things that we did here with our team was a sync, not unlike what we just did with the group. So we began that intentionally opening the space with an intentional exercise. And for those of you who last long enough through mystery school, we will probably do that at the end. And we will also do a sync at the end of this to close it. And so there was some intentional work that was done, not just in terms of the labor to open this place, but there was some intentional work that was done around the field. Oh, did I say a word that's on the screen? To open and create the energetic container for the space. And what's interesting, from doing 60 hubs, I'm finding now that I won't open a hub without doing that, because the level of disharmony that happens when you haven't harmonized is makes the work much harder. The work's already very hard, but without that synchronization, it becomes really, really difficult. Is it 11 already? Wow. Okay. Do you mind if I lead us on a meditation?
Yeah, and
say something first. Yeah.
Just 1 minute with 11 o'clock. This is a very special moment right now, as people all over this country remember those that have given their lives for the freedoms we enjoy. So as you go into this meditation, the invitation is to remember it's Armistice Day. It's it's actually 103 years, I think it is, since my great-grandfather was among those to end the First World War. At great cost, over 1 million men lost their lives in that war. And so as we go into this meditation, and just do invite, I do believe we often don't have in our minds the way I think potentially we could, the collective ancestors that have sacrificed their lives for the freedoms we enjoy today. And so that's an invitation as we remember the poppy appeal and those service people that have given their lives before us.
So let's set an alarm, Davey, for 11:11. And it's amazing because it's 11:11, November 11th, and we'll be meditating to 11:11. So it's 11:11:11:11. And there's a reason why we talked about this, but I'm not going to tell you what it is because you have to know to ask the right questions. Let's begin. We're going to let you sink into your own form of meditation. And but what I would ask is look at this screen here and see if you can access some of those techniques in this meditation. So the breath is the basis. It's 11:11. Any questions? If you just joined us during our meditation, Jedi Mystery School is a new thing that we're doing, and we're sort of creating it as we go. And the only thing we know so far is that we all have skills and techniques which we can share. And by sharing them with each other, we can strengthen the skills and techniques that we have. So it's about co-learning, but it's also about questions. Because even if someone tells you answers, if you don't know the right question or feel the right question, it doesn't really mean very much. We've given you some clues. So if you have a skill you'd like to share, please come up and do so. If you have a question you'd like to ask, please let us know. Yorgos?
Necessarily your own, but the way they relate to somebody else's, you can be either on the good cop side or the bad cop side. You can be the hyperactive environmentalist, or you can be the skeptic entrepreneur. And in the eyes of the other is that we define on what side of the barricade you're on, good or bad. But we're not meeting in the middle. We're not transcending this paradigm of confrontation. And so my question is, are we failing? And I'm not blaming the organizers, but us as human beings, are we failing? And is there something we can do to address this failure?
Nick?
Okay, first I will pose a question to the room to think about, and then I can talk about my experience in Jedi Mystery School.
Great.
Okay, first off, I think it's important to ask yourself why there should be Jedi Mystery Schools. Because usually with schools, you're trying to educate and solve issues in yourself, and so ask yourself with these words above you, why? Why do we need this? Why are we doing this right now? Why are we meditating in the middle of a building in Glasgow? So for me, I always ask myself, why, all the time? Why am I doing this? I myself am in 3 different Jedi councils in Las Vegas, Austin, and Wisconsin. What I find myself doing the most in my role is trying to bridge the education gap between kind of like the mystery of what this stuff is and educating people on how to like walk in that area. As the question was posed, what is Jedi, what is mystery, what is school? For me, modern day Jedis are in combination energy workers that are also trying to kind of educate people how to kind of communicate on an energetic field would be the simplest way that I would put it. Mystery, what is mystery is, it is a constant state of flow state, because in mystery you can find excitement. And so if we sit in mystery all the time and we just kind of explore that all the time, it's kind of a fun way to live. And so you will always feel, when you go across these Jedi schools, they're always shrouded in mystery, not because they're trying to hide anything, but because they're trying to sit in that constant shifting flow that is the world around you. And then school is pretty straightforward. We're trying to educate and bring awareness. My skill set, I guess, in this, besides doing a lot of energy work and educating, is I talk about awareness quite often and the massive shift we're going through. So I try to logically break down what is considered woo-woo side of this constantly and try to explain to people in a way that can be comprehended all the time. So I think that in my Jedi councils that we do, there's really not that much talking. We usually just build spaces that can do three main things, which is give people a chance to have massive shifts in awareness in a short amount of time and integrate those into their lives, go through deep emotional trauma healing in those amount of times, and just kind of energetically communicate. And that's kind of how we've always done it. So, yeah, this is not what I expected to be talking about in the middle of COP, so this is pretty funny to me. And this is why I have all these necklaces around my neck, because each of these tells a story of different councils or journeys that I've gone on. They're not just things on my neck, I promise.
I have a question.
Of course.
What is the story of these things?
Okay. I will tell maybe two of them. I'm trying to think what's appropriate for this room. The beads, which are called malas. So malas are used in a lot of prayer cultures, and they have a certain number of beads. And the way they're actually appropriately used is you pick a mantra. You can pick anything. I'm abundant. You can use Latin. And you move your hand down each bead, and you repeat that mantra until you're through the whole bead. This is how these work. I am from the Cherokee Nation. These were gifted to me when I was on a mountain in California doing some pretty fun experiences with some shamans and Indian tribes. So that's where these come from. They're a reminder of my heritage. The tooth around my neck is a fossilized buffalo tooth that I got in Moab when I was on a random adventure with the first love of my life. It is a cracked buffalo tooth because during one of our Jedi councils, there was what I would consider a massive shift of awareness in a room, and it exploded around my neck. And it's a reminder to me that I don't do certain types of energetic work. The third one, which
It just spontaneously exploded?
Yes. Yep. I have lived in a world of awareness since I was very young. Many things that people consider new or thing has been in my life my whole life. So it's not like, it's very normalized in my life. So I live in between two worlds of like a lot of logic and business and very much living the life of weird energy stuff. The third one is a medallion. It's a frequency medallion by Patrick Flanagan. He's very big in energy work. But it was actually worn by my best friend for 5 years straight. He recently passed, and I wear it as a reminder of him all the time. And then the fourth one, which is a cross necklace, is my faith. I have been a Christian and have walked the line of an interesting faith path my whole life. And I've run councils and I've done talks, which is, I will say, it is rare, as Lucian has talked about Christianity, for me to be continuing walking in that faith path while simultaneously speaking on awareness, because there is a lot of synchronicities between different faith regimes and spirituality. And I kind of step in this role of duplicity where I have, the way that I believe is spirituality is your personal relationship with whatever you believe in. And then religion is the rules that you choose to follow to grow that relationship. And that's how I've always looked at it. And those are my necklaces.
Thanks for sharing. Definitely, I've come to the conclusion recently about Christianity, because I grew up in a really Christian background. Not that I had discounted it in my adult life, but I think the culture discounts religion extremely, like especially mainstream culture. And in a weird way, like Christian culture, especially in the U.S., is its own culture, but mainstream culture really discounts it. And it's really interesting because when you start to see things in terms of frequency, Christianity or Islam or Hinduism can become compatible with that because they're a frequency. And so that's actually helped me reconcile a lot of my Christian upbringing in the context of where I'm at now, because I see it as a particular frequency, and particularly like a ladder for helping people move their conscious awareness. So if you think about society and the shift from essentially animism and paganism into organized religion, it also mirrored a shift in the culture and our society and our evolution as a society. So that is a really important component of our like species development. So not to be discounted. Question back there? Yeah, or just come up, or if you want to come up or stand up or whatever works for you.
Got plenty
Or
of
we'll
chairs
send
up
you a
here.
mic.
So I think in the times of collective activation, right, which we all feel in different fields, you can COP climate change or whatever else. One topic that I've been following in my work, which is in essence around forests. What is bravery? What does it mean to be brave individually, also collectively? Whereas change makers, occasionally or permanently, where can we act in a brave way? And what does it mean? Both spiritually, but also from a business perspective, from a media perspective sometimes, everything that we do along the lines. What does it mean to be brave? And that's something I'm trying to meditate about a lot, knowing that with hope and all the change that we're feeling are coming, bravery might help to push in certain ways something forward. So that's an open question that I'm trying to resolve.
That's a really good question, actually.
I mean, I feel a little bit of bravery just putting this on the schedule. You know, I mean, this is not a typical hub activity pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, I feel it's a very essential hub activity. But I had a lot of pushback even from my team about, what are you doing? You can't let clients see this on the schedule. What will they think?
I love that question, Flo. And my previous company was called Brave New Talent for 10 years. Brave New was, I thought a lot about bravery and what is courage in this world. Particularly, there's this concept that I think is very interesting called a cosmic orphan. I think many of you might be familiar with this feeling of not belonging here. Like many of us have kind of born into this world and be like, why is the world the way it is? Like, it doesn't make sense. It seems to be designed in a way that isn't in harmony with all life. It's quite the opposite. And there's a term for that, those of us that are born here and find ourselves like wondering if we belong to this age, to this epoch. We're cosmic orphans. And so maybe we can find family in our orphanhood. But I do often wonder, what does it mean to be brave in the modern world and to step out into the world and with what we believe needs to transform, beginning with ourselves, of course. You know, I just noticed that if you look at the kind of mythologies of the past, of things like knights' traditions, where people would make an oath on their life to follow a particular path, we really don't have that in this world right now, yet the scale of the threat facing us is now existential. It wasn't actually existential in the past. So we've never needed more courage as a society. We've never needed to be to be courageous at a planetary scale, to have what I love to call humble audacity, you know, to have humility in our audacity, but recognize that we as individuals need to come together as a collective to rewrite a story. And so I do think bravery is a great question right now, and how can we create cultures of supporting that bravery and that and kind of codes of conduct. With the case of United Planet, which I'll share later, we developed an oath, a Gaian oath, that's almost like a Hippocratic oath for time travelers. But it is hello Jen, where Jen is in the house. You know, I think it is a very good question right now as to how we can hold the beliefs we have whilst living in the world that we live in, and being a vessel of change. You know, as St. Francis said, an instrument of thy peace.
We have another question. Glad to see the questions. Do you have the mic back there somewhere? Oh yeah, there you go.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Do you want to go first? Can I add an answer of the bravery?
Can you say it louder?
Because the answer that, what is your name? Florence, that what is bravery now?
Welcome to Glasgow. Wait, can we put Jen in between us? We have a session in an hour, but this is Jedi Mystery School. So it's our first one. This is our friend Jen. And we have a session with her at 12 talking about some other interesting things. But the first rule of Jedi Mystery School is it's questions only.
Got it.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Could you say your question again? Just give us, I got distracted. Okay, beautiful. That in itself is a message. Acknowledged. Please. Be in a circle.
Coherently and have a human constellation which reflects the council. Now, because clearly you're on top.
Fair enough.
And we're disparate. So I would suggest just like kind of like quickly make a seating
Yeah.
position where we feel the
That's a great question.
ideas.
That's a great thing. We can move these chairs around, so let's do that. We'll come back through. That's great. That feels, you know, it's funny because I actually thought about that when we were starting. And I just did that at the beginning. This feels much better. Feels much better. Okay, so we can also pass the mic. This does feel so much better. Thank you for that. Okay, so back to your question.
I got something to add real quick. It's just funny. So we do councils all the time.
She was gonna.
Oh, you ready?
Yeah, sorry. I'm Taya, I'm from Peru. I just wanted to, I think, like reflect a little bit on, like a follow-up on what you said. I guess like a little bit of an invitation of like what is good and what is bad, like in climate change and in forests and all of this COP reality that we're in. And that I think is tied up a little bit to maybe like the idea that I have of what Jedi is. Because we have all light and we all have shadow inside. And they're all both crucial elements. Like the light cannot exist without the darkness. So perhaps like, and this is a reflection of mine, a little bit of an invitation to rethink those definitions, and like perhaps we can talk about it. So this is perhaps, I'm mixing a lot of things in here because my skill is, or one of them at least, is I'm a scientist. I do research on, our background is on forestry, but it's especially on the socio-political aspects of forests and land use and the change and indigenous peoples' rights. And one of the things that I think I've been finding a lot, and what my research is on, is about power. So there's powerful stakeholders, there's non-powerful stakeholders, there's people who are aware of things before others as well. So then can we really be judgmental if perhaps like maybe we are aware of something that other peoples are not, and then how do we help empower those who may not have that awareness or who may not have that willingness, you know? Like it's about also tying back to the work I think I'm doing, and I don't want to talk about too much about that, but like about equity, like how do we leverage the playing field in all aspects, like for the ones who have less powerful voices, like indigenous peoples, for example, like how do we empower them, and also how do we empower the powerful stakeholders that in this reality sometimes are even the less powerful ones, because they're not always invited to these spaces because they are like, you know, they're demonized by certain sectors. So like how do we engage these people to have equal opportunities to just become like even aware, you know? Yeah, sorry, that was perhaps a little bit too much in there, but a lot of, I guess, reflections I think are important.
Thank you. Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen. Thank you for sharing that. You're right, that was a lot. Just for context, I've been consulting the Burning Man project and Burning Man organization for the last decade on impact and innovation. And so I have some thoughts I'd love to share with you. It's actually funny, Stan, because the first thing that came to mind while you were saying that was actually a conversation that you and I had at Davos in 2020. Not the main discussion we had, but later on in the evening when there was that gal from CNN there. And Stan asked everybody very eloquently, what do you think the future of society holds? And what would be your wish for the future of society? And this woman, this news anchor from CNN, she said, I wish that there would be authentic reporting. And it wasn't my turn to talk actually, but I couldn't really contain myself. And I was like, authenticized by who? Who authenticizes our reporting? And so the first question that comes up for me in response to your question, because nobody really has the answers, of course, is that how can we create an equal opportunity marketplace for information? And I think right now there's a lot of criticism on the boom in social media and this kind of second digital pivot we've gone through, whereby there's no authenticated voice. So that's true. However, I think that the more that we share stories of vulnerability, of failure in order to succeed versus just the lessons of succeeding, we start to create a marketplace of value around our failures and how that leads to growth strategy and growth mindset. So first and foremost, for those minority groups, being vulnerable and expressing their failures, helping to equalize this kind of bullshit mindset that, like, you know, there's too much information going around and none of it is authenticated. Of course, some of it doesn't make sense, but I think we have to push past that into creating our own references and ecosystems based on experimentation and vulnerability, and really, really popularize the notion of failure being one of the leading pieces to growth mindset.
Are you saying we have to build our own new forms of authentication?
I am saying we have to build our own new forms of authentication, and for people like you, that means like straight to the top, like systems design. But for people like who were represented in this question, I think that means more vulnerability and more prototyping, sharing your ideas before they're complete, not being afraid to demonstrate your belief systems, almost like an artist would visualize their art and share it with others. We have to get more vulnerable and encourage people to share their voices as well as their failures. Yeah.
Which is bravery.
Yeah.
Nick, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say that's bravery. I was going to make a comment earlier when we had, what do we have now? So we've done councils, and our councils are always 12 people. And when we first sat down, there was 12 of us. I thought it was funny.
Where'd the 12th go?
Courage and bravery, the difference?
Senya.
Yeah, I can, for myself, courage and bravery. So in my life, I've only recently just been vulnerable. I was 28 years disassociative from my emotions and very logical. And then in the last 6 months have shifted to vulnerable leadership as my main thing, which has been a wild shift. And so bravery now, you know, before I was in the military, bravery and courage had a very different meaning, right? Push forward, shoot the guns, protect the people, and now it's like in a sea of a lot of voices, remembering that your voice is just as important as everyone else's, and being okay and speaking out is so much bravery these days, because it's easy to get swept up in like what's happening around us, and like, is my opinion that important and stuff like that? Is my vulnerability that important? So real bravery now, I think, is like, especially for men in leadership specifically, them being vulnerable in their leadership is real bravery these days. We just haven't seen it. Like, women fortunately have crushed it at being vulnerable in leadership for years, and as they come into power more, like, we can learn a lot, and so we have to open ourselves up to vulnerability more, and that takes a lot of bravery, I think, from my standpoint. And then courage, I think, is different, that it's more of an outer quality for me. I can just be courageous, like just step in front of the bullet, jump in front of the lion. It's more of like an existential thing for me. I was like, oh, cool, yeah. So that's how I've always looked at it.
Excuse me, I have a question for you. When you mentioned this strange situation when the energy field exploded a physical matter, I can recall a few instances from my life when this sort of very strange, mysterious, esoteric, as if, you know, my senses are tuned to 3 dimensions. The 4th dimension is time. However, more often I am realizing that there are so many other dimensions to reality, but my 3-dimensional brain is not attuned to these other frequencies. And I'm actually thinking about various, could be plant medicines or neurochemicals or some scientific compounds that would unlock potential of my brain. One of the key medical terms here is a default mode network, something that keeps me alive, and, you know, I don't need to think too much about walking. At the same time, it keeps like my brain in a cage. So this is pretty much an open question about your tried and tested technique that are reasonably safe, that are okay to, you know, give some hints and recommendations, because I'm very keen to learn about your techniques to tune your brain, tune to the energy, and yeah, be the Jedi master.
Hi, thank you so much. I don't know if this is an answer to your question or some of the questions, but it's maybe another skill I would love to add to the list, and I think it's all of us have a sense of that, and it's centricity, the center. How to find the center in yourself and how to get in a stage of unreactiveness, but activity, proactivity with this reaction. And something that I've experienced myself personally, but also in the work that I'm doing, and I strongly believe that a lot of our actions, being it because you're not not exposed to the context, or you didn't have the experiences that you went through to find actually what this means to be in your center, or learning from what does meditation actually mean if they say find your center, but actually experiencing then this space of nothingness, or a space of where you feel now you are the one acting instead of reacting to impulses that the environment that you work, that the global situation is posing to you. And so you can then, from this point of the center, be at least to the point of your experience more informed, or do your best and show up as your best self, until of course you go again through a next iteration of finding your center. So
bravery, courage, and also the invitation for other individuals and organizations to join is, in my strong belief, also to see them, to your point, in their context. Are they reacting or are they actually acting? And how can we invite them into a state of centricity to start acting? And I think this is a big part of leadership, and maybe being a Jedi, giving this space without judgment first, allowing and understanding the process that it takes, and then taking the individual or the company or organization from there. Yeah.
Thank you. Appear again, the magical moment, because when he asked about bravery, in that moment it started to beat my heart, because in my experience, bravery is when you can control your temper and don't react when the violence is in between all of us. Because we are living in a world, all the people are angry now. We are in crisis, every people is angry, so because of this hurt people without intention. And when you are conscious about this, the bravery is to don't react. And allow, exactly you say, don't shoot, don't criticize, embrace the body pain, transcend it, and open the space. This.
I can answer your question with what I do, I guess, on a more like in the moment thing. So we do live in bodies. So for me, the first technique in terms of being more Jedi is take care of your body first, right? Ice baths, eat healthy, clean yourself up. It will allow you to expand your awareness. And then outside, next step for me is always the people I surround myself with. More people you hang out with that have really high emotional intelligence or have a state of love about them and have growth in their mind, it will make it easier. The way that I look at it is like, how do I make it easier to tap into these states? It's always the way that I treat myself, the people that I surround myself, and the environments that I'm in. Those are the three stages that I look at. So put yourself in environments where you can practice, talk, have these conversations, and just hang out with people that are doing the same thing. And then like, if you, like he said, if you're in a fasting state, I fast every day, you're just more clear, right? When I do an ice bath, I'm just more clear. When I eat healthy, I'm just more clear. And when you're clear, mystery doesn't become so mysterious. And then you can start to play with these things. And I think emotional intelligence is really important for this because it helps you kind of handle the crisis from a very balanced way, in a very brave way, where you're not reacting. And I hear this all the time is like, we're not human doings, we're human beings. So like being in the state of being all the time versus just always doing. Sometimes just sitting and just living in the space around you, just witnessing the flow is a great way. It's like to practice this stuff, it's really not as complicated as we need to make it to be. So that's how I've kind of worked through this stuff.
Hi everybody, it's great to be here with all of you. This is my first Jedi Mystery School. I'm really happy to be here. There are four, so I was asked not too long ago how I live wide awake and how I stay optimistic in the work that I do around climate. And it takes a lot of bravery to be optimistic and facing the greatest challenge we've ever faced as a species. It's kind of brave to be out there in the world saying that we can actually solve this thing, right? And part of my daily meditation that I do, my practice, as I think on these four key characteristics that allow me to live wide awake, which was the question that was asked for me. How I can both have the intention every day of being authentic to my true self, authenticity to myself. And then with that, through that authenticity, how can I have integrity of my word and actions? And then through that authentic and self-expressing integrity, how can I be empathic to myself and to others around me? How can I care for, feel, see, learn, hold and support myself and others? And then through that authentic expression of integrity, empathic nature, how can I find compassion for myself, for others, for all life, for all humanity, and all existence? And these 4 characteristics are part of my daily meditation, thinking deeply on authenticity, integrity, empathy, and compassion, and how those 4 characteristics is a long, hard process to learn and to experience and to express and manifest in myself and the world I operate in. It's a constant journey. And it's really hard, and it requires a lot of bravery to be authentic. Really, in the world that we live in, to be accepting of who you truly are requires a tremendous amount of bravery. To have integrity of your word and action is a brave, courageous act in the world today. To speak your truth, your true self, without fear, that is bravery. To be vulnerable and open to feeling yourself, your inner self, and to try to be open to feeling others around you as best as you can is brave and scary, because it opens you up to all kinds of things that your world tells you you shouldn't be able to do. And then to have actual compassion, love for yourself, to truly love, respect, honor, and accept yourself and everyone around you, and all life, all existence. I mean, it's a multiple life journey to get there. I mean, I'm only on a shred of it, but a tiny little bit of it. But that, to me, is bravery. And to express those characteristics in how we live and how we struggle to deeply meditate on that, to think on that, to express that, and to live that. That's how I try to live wide awake in the world, and try to be a brave human, and keeps me optimistic with that we can actually make the change that we need and create that regenerative future that we need. It's a brave act, and yeah, that's just what I wanted to share.
There's a very beautiful quote I came across about a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Creation is an act of becoming. And I was kind of trying to understand the angle of bravery. You know, I kind of really internalized, and I thought, to dream audaciously, to really embrace the fear and say, I'm gonna fucking do it. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say it. And it's very curious, because that idea of really putting yourself out on the line at a critical moment and say, I am going to bring this into becoming. I'm going to put that truth right there. You know, that also requires a lot of, flexing this muscle right here. Through self-appreciation, through compassion, through saying, might hurt me, but you know what? Let's do this, So I like that, and I just wanted to compliment that kind of internal work when it comes to really facing the dragon, sometimes riding it, sometimes learning to tickle it, with this kind of audaciousness and this fearlessness.
I completely connect deeply to how we sort of wielded the conversation, how you summarized it. I think that just one very last thing I want to add. It's hard, it's brave, and so on, but it's universally rewardful, right? Once you're able to be authentic and feel that moment, I mean, we're afraid of it, but once we feel it, we're in that second, it's immensely rewardful. And that gives that power to actually understand and know exactly when to do the right thing in the right moment. So we all have our little acupuncture point that we can sometimes push in our journey to create change, and I think they are required in all our work. But I like that once we're connected, of making a decision, a silent decision almost, this is the right moment to speak up or do an action, do project, whatever. And it's immensely rewardful to be in that state.
On the question, and before Chad, because Chad's leaving, you might enjoy just a quick answer on, you don't have to sit down, because I know you're going, but I just, back to your question real quick about technique. You asked about like what are some specific techniques that you can use to get to some of these realms. And so I just thought it might be worth sharing a little bit of data or research about how you can do that. So when you meditate, what you're really doing is slowing the electrical activity in the left side of your brain and increasing the electrical activity in the right hemisphere of your brain. So one is the kind of creative center, the other is the analytical center. The reason you close your eyes when you meditate, the reason that you like shut out these other sensory perceptions is you're trying to quiet the left side of the brain. And when you quiet the left side of the brain and increase the activity in the right side of the brain, what you're aiming to get to is something called a hemisync. So the hemisync is when the electrical currents between the right side and the left side of the brain reach harmony. And you can actually physically see that in your meditation. If you know, I don't want to like imprint too much because there's a danger in imprinting. That's why I say the questions are important here. So my experience is not necessarily going to be your experience. But one thing that we do know from science is that a hemisync is extremely important for getting access to the extra dimensional perception that comes with a lot of this stuff. It's basically the subconscious, exactly. And so to get to the doorway of subconscious, there are some signs. There are some signs at the doorway. All the way back through history, monks and others, like there's a thing called Saint Germain's flame. Do you guys know what Saint Germain's flame is? This is actually an old Christian concept, but there was a monk in the 12th or 13th century who talked about Saint Germain's flame. And it was described as this kind of violet or purple flame or a purple flow. And one of the first things you learn in energy clearing and energy work is to kind of look for this violet door in your meditation. And a lot of times it will appear as a kind of cloud in front of your thing. So even in the Bible it says you see without seeing. When you close your eyes, but you let your eyes work, you can actually begin to see. And the doorway to your subconscious is something that you can see with your eyes. So as you approach Hemisink, you will see it takes about, at least depending on how deep you can go and how quickly, it can take an hour or not at all when you're first starting out. But as you get farther and better practice, you can get there in a couple of minutes. And from that doorway, you can dive through. And it's like going from a flat screen in front of you to a three-dimensional screen that you're moving through. And depending on how much you meditate and how good you are at achieving Hemisink, that is the doorway to get to these other spaces, which, as Jen just said, exist in your subconscious.
I just want to point out that there's also people who might go completely past that purple flame and might not ever see it. People who see other things too. That's just one of the recognition symbols. I want to talk about this a little bit more later, but I think also one of the ways that you connect to your subconscious is very much creating space for what you don't know, and allowing yourself to get lost in time, do things for no reason, not be afraid to look silly, and effectively enter a state of play is also a very good way to communicate. But I'll hand it back to you because I think you were on to some sort of narrative.
I think it's good. I just wanted Chad to felt called to hear that. Huh? Yeah. But no, he was here, and then he got up, and then he said back. Go ahead.
Can I just quickly add something? I think it's related to many of the things that we've been saying now, like to bravery and to self-appreciation. I think before reaching, I guess, to be able to be equanimous and to, not judge and be brave, I think something that's really interesting is the self-knowledge part, which is also really tied to meditation. I didn't want to not mention just the self-knowledge for authenticity, at least, it's a pre-requirement, I suppose. So yes, tied to meditation as well. But I think these days, and through meditation, I think there's only 3 things I know about myself that I'm certain about. But I know with certainty that I am or I am not, like those 3 qualities. So, oh, well, actually now that we're talking about bravery, and this is something that I am very strong and resilient, merge into one. I am brave and I am dedicated. So, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. Maybe another technique, another invitation to look into the nothingness, because around us we have a perception that it's nothing that is around us, but when you actually start with your eyes to sense into the in-between, you might be also surprised. Something that I find very fascinating is that we do know that animals and other life forms on this planet see different colors and they see different things, so it means this information exists around us. So one of the techniques is surprise yourself when you look into the nothingness.
My name is Brittany. I think one of the techniques that has been really powerful for me has been, or just recognizing or becoming more familiar with my nervous system and really splitting my awareness and like honing the capacity to be tracking my body as I'm also in conversation. And like right now my heart's beating really fast and I feel caffeine moving through my whole system. But yeah, I also wanted to just kind of respond and reflect to your question earlier, Jurgis, about are we failing? And I've had a lot of really beautiful moments the last couple of weeks, and there were these 2 Buddhist monks here from Plum Village in France, and they were in the blue zone. I think they've left, but every morning they were leading mindfulness meditations in the blue zone for the negotiators. And I caught them last week, and they shared so many pieces of wisdom, but from their perspective, they shared that everybody's rushing around and in their heads, and so they came in as this like united field of awareness, and people would just kind of come to them and instantly start crying, just being in the field with them. And it really touched me. Like I think maybe in some ways we're failing, but seeing them here, I was like, there's gave me a lot of hope. And I think many people are just waiting for the invitation and for the spaciousness to be able to surrender and feel.
Thank you very much for these techniques. Actually, I would like to share my favorite technique, because after all, it's a Jedi mystery school. We live in 3D. Sometimes what I do, I make art with my left hand to synchronize my right hemisphere. And sometimes I on purpose use my left hand to become, more aligned between my hemispheres. And also juggling helps. And, these 3 balls up in the air, you focus on the moment. It helps to synchronize your brain. Being upside down for a moment, headstand, handstand, some aerial swing, relaxing for your spine, allowing, blood to circulate. These are super easy techniques. Every time I do them, they help me. And now I'm realizing I need to have more consistency, because very often I do something, once or twice, I see the result, but I'm missing consistency. And recently I had a beautiful epiphany. I am originally from Poland, and I visited a festival. And I met a friend I haven't seen in 10 years. And I've seen how his life developed over 10 years. he accomplished this, this. And I've also looked back at my own life, what I've accomplished in the past 10 years. This. So some people make the quarterly plans, annual plans, but now I'm just realizing I should plan my life in decades. I think it was some famous guy, I don't know who exactly was it. I think it was these guys from Exponential Technologies, you know, Peter Diamandis, Salim Ismail. You underestimate what you can do in a decade, but you overestimate what you can do in a year. So this is an invitation for you to plan your life in decades, and if you have some other magical techniques, some upside down juggling in some cryogenic chamber while doing breath work and meditating in the space of emptiness, please share.
I think people have also said, I can't remember who, Seth Godin? I don't know, somebody said that we should be making short-term goals, not long-term ones, and evaluating those short-term goals more consistently in order to recalibrate our long-term goals. Yeah, the decade principle is definitely something. I think Terence McKenna also talks about the decade principle.
I was going to check in. It is noon. Do you want to, Jurgis knows about closing council. Do we want to consider closing council and then stepping into the next conversation, or do we want to keep this running?
Next conversation is going to move to 1, so you guys decide.
I will let Stan make that decision.
So we did move this back a little bit, so we have the time and space to keep going with it if you guys want. There is just a quick recap on the day because we're still on the live stream as well. So for those of you on the live stream, 12 o'clock, we're meant to be going into Burning Man and the Great Unknown, a conversation with Jen Sander, but she's asked us to move that back until 1 o'clock, so we're going to accommodate that. At 2 o'clock, we kick off the up game with other people coming in. There will be, I think, a little bit of food coming up, so I'm down for keeping it casual for right now, and we'll go into a more formal fireside chat with me and Jen at 1 o'clock. Is she here? Oh, great. Well, we also had planned Sophia Swire to talk about Jedi, so that's great that she's arrived. So I think when Sophia arrives back, we'll transition into that, but maybe we'll do it here in circle, and then at 1 o'clock we'll go back to the stage. Now, this is actually kind of incredibly pertinent because one of the things I was thinking about was talking to you about immediacy. And so I think it's great that we've had this conversation about bravery and how we feel internally. But I think there's also some things that we can get into around signs and signals. And there was a clue earlier in the morning about signs and signals. And so I'm going to invite you to think about what that clue could have been. And Gino Yu, who was one of the people who kind of broke me a little bit with some conversations that we had in Davos, and some of you know Gino, had talked to me about a conversation that I'll try to share with you for a second. So, immediacy is a really good guide to synchronicity. And one of the techniques that you can use is, as you said, Tatiana, to be aware and to be hyper aware of what's going on around you. And so the way I think of this is, imagine if the universe was communicating with you at all times, but there was an extra layer of communication than what is immediately obvious. So when someone feels the need to pop up out of the circle, or somebody pops into the circle, or you're at a party and the energy is like building and then somebody smashes a glass, these are all, at a certain level in your Jedi awareness, they're not just the things that seem to be the things that they are. There's like an extra layer of meaning attached to it. And coming to terms with this is a difficult thing because it may make you feel like a crazy person because everything suddenly takes on meaning. And a lot of indigenous tribes operate this way. A bird flies by and they're like, oh my God, a bird flew by, and it means something. Or there's all these like signs and symbols that have meaning that go beyond that. A lot of technologists who are in this space have kind of translated this into this idea of simulation. And this idea that, imagine, as Elon Musk says, there's a 99% chance that we're living in a simulation. And if there are multiple simulations, it's almost like we see the world right now in code because we live in a computer age. Older cultures saw it in a different, almost shamanic way. And some future society will certainly see it in a different way. We interpret this reality by the codes and symbols that we live in this age. So whether you're a hacker who sees it as like downloads and code, or you're a shaman who sees it in a much older way, it's all kind of the same interpretation of reality having a fabric of basis behind it. And so that makes the immediate experience that we're having in this simulation extremely interesting, because every single input that comes through the simulation is meaningful. And I found that over time, becoming hyper aware of those things is a way to get closer to flow state and synchronicity. And the experience is that the closer you get to synchronicity, the better the simulation performs. So if you guys have a look at a story I wrote a while ago called Descendant Theory, I attempted through thought to piece together a coherent story between singularity, synchronicity, and simulations. And the basic idea of that theory is that in this space-time continuum, we are carbon working with silicon. So silicon is a machine, carbon is us, life. But in this timeline, we're heading towards a singularity point where they merge, along with everything else, into singularity. Once you achieve singularity, our descendants in this timeline would be part of that. Whether it's your great-grandchildren, your 10 times great-grandchildren, and whatever the great-grandchildren of your machine, car, AI ends up being. When that singularity point happens, a kind of oneness, it seems logical that it would spin up a range of simulations in order to continue improving its own singularity. Because at some point it gets so tight and so dense. These simulations are incentivized to perform better, to improve the efficiency. So this is a kind of logical explanation for synchronicity, because the singularity wants the best performing simulation to improve itself. In the simulation, the closer you get to synchronicity, in whatever small way, the more, the better the simulation performs. And so the Damanhurians believe that the simulation resets with 7 paths every 4 seconds. So you can imagine every 4 seconds there's a time fork in front of us, and we're choosing which simulation we're going into. Yeah, yeah. Which is why synchronicity helps, because if you just go with the flow and try to find synchronicity, you can actually guide yourself in and toward better simulations. For me, I've been extremely focused over the last year on simulation hops. Is it possible to move dramatically between simulations? And how do you keep yourself in simulations? And there's some theory that the fact that all of us are here together is a frequency situation. So everything in your field is a function of the simulation choices that you've made to get to this point. Nothing really exists outside of this physical reality where we are perceiving, and all of our individual simulations from our own perspectives are syncing into one shared reality. And this is why vision is so important, and it's why meditation is so important, because as you move your own practice through the field, you attract different outcomes, and you also attract different people who physically appear in your simulation field. And it's a wonderful explanation for synchronicity. So I live my life by this as much as I can, as when I'm remembering to. And it amounts to little things. So when I'm at the airport and I'm going through airport security, I do my best to improve the functional reality of TSA. Take the extra bin and put it in the thing. Try to help, because this is like a choke point in the simulation, TSA. Because here's the thing, like just by moving that bin a little bit further, which saves 5 seconds, which then moves somebody else, that might get somebody else through the checkpoint and make their flight, who would have otherwise missed their flight, then resulted in a thing. Like these ripples in space-time, looking for choke points in the simulation and working to actively try to improve them. I mean, litter is another example, and this is a Burning Man lesson that we've all learned about leaving no trace. Like we see how much better the simulation of Burning Man performs when we leave no trace. When we leave a trace, it's harder. The other example that I just loved, Yorgos, is I wanted to move the room into a circle when we started, but I just didn't have the energy to try to disrupt the room to do it. But when you suggested it, and the whole group did it together, we did it in like a second, and it was so easy. And none of us had to hardly do anything. We transformed our reality, and then we transformed the coherence in the room. So I love that you suggested that, because I was thinking it before. And that gets us back to telepathy. So I have a question for you all. When you were in your meditation, the 10-minute meditation, did any of you try to telepathically connect to anyone else? And if so, can you tell us who? And the answer can absolutely be no, but I'm just really curious. Or we could just keep it telepathic.
I certainly tried to, if it's the same spectrum, which I have a hunch it might be, I certainly tried to communicate with my ancestors. And I think it might be the same energy lines that we can communicate with each other telepathically as we can communicate with our ancestors. So I actually think of it as a language that we can get more and more fluent in. And this is actually one of the points I think that might be worth sharing now, is that, Yorgos, you were asked, good cop, bad cop, are we failing? I think this narrative of left and right polarization, us, them, blame, shame, the unwholesome threesome hero, victim, perpetrator, spiraling round and round and round, the merry-go-round. I don't think there's a cure of that by coming more into the middle. Personally, I think it's actually going into a different dimension, which I've spoken about before with you, but it's about actually elevating to what I believe Einstein was describing when he said we don't solve problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And this does bring it, I'm going to try and loop these all these things together with the question of telepathy, is that what if the next dimension of thinking of left and right separation, us and them, is actually shifting up a level and including time in our dimension of understanding, to such a point that we can go backwards and forwards, backwards into our collective ancestry and communicating the wisdom of our collective and individual ancestry, and forwards into the wisdom of our future selves. And that gives us a whole nother dimension to play with, to transcend from left and right politics into an awareness of oneness, into an awareness, and it's in that other dimension. So just looping all that together, I do believe that telepathy and communication outside of time is like a language, like a polychronic language. We call it Gaian in the game. And so in meditation, I was remembering 5 years ago when I was at a place called Avalon, where I had a very profound experience with my great-grandfather, who has huge karmic debt, and so I was connecting to that during the meditation, to him 103 years ago, you know, playing his role in ending the First World War. But I was also curious as we were there, I was curious about the experience each one of us were having, and so I guess that is a sense of being aware of each other's presence in a meditation state.
I really want to pass this around, but so as you said that, and that siren came by, the question is that your grandfather resonating? And this is like the beauty of it, because it does make it all a game, but I'm sitting here you are talking about communicating with your ancestors, and then suddenly this interference in the field comes through. It's so strong. It's like, and just as you said that, for me, there's an idea called Clairsentience. So when someone speaks a profound truth that I haven't heard before, I feel it as a prana wave through my body. And so when you were talking about the backwards forwards thing and this idea that perhaps there's another, I don't know if I agree that left right is congruous to backwards forwards, but the idea of backwards forwards sent like a wave through my body. So I know that there's like some level of energetic like wave when something really resonates, is super true to me. I feel it in my body. It goes from my head to my toe, and it's like a wave. And this is called prana. And when you learn how to feel prana, you can know when someone is speaking a kind of esoteric truth. So I just want to reinforce, I felt that esoteric truth. Why do we
This is brilliant. I will meditate with my future self and with the spirits of my ancestors, because the consciousness does not have this time boundary. It's a different dimension. That is great technique. And just to rewind to something that you said about the synchronicity and consciousness and being close to the source of creation, I've noticed this many, many times over and over. Maybe you've also noticed. Law of the karma is the immutable law of the universe, and whenever I made some mistake, very often I get penalized in real time, which is great, which means that I don't carry my karma behind me. And I think that if you are close to the source, this feedback loop is very instantaneous.
I think, getting back to your question, what I perceive around telepathy for my own personal life, I think it's, for me, it's so important as a call to myself to put the ego as much out of telepathy. There might be some skills developed uniquely where you have a targeted WhatsApp-like telepathic truth at some point. But what I feel it is much more about connecting to what we said before is when you're able to really calm down and feel that collective flow and target or tap into that collective flow and universal truth beyond us, the types of messages that come that are kind of timeless, they're present there. And you connect through telepathy, my limited perception on what it is, through them. So very practically in the meditation, we work with more than 15,000 indigenous farmers across the high Andes planting trees. And what I felt here was kind of, tapping into a probably imaginary vortex that there is, sharing and receiving at the same time the messages, the topics we're talking about, not only us, but also at COP. What are the decisions that are made? How does it influence our world? How does the finance talk and the politics talk and us entrepreneurs and others, how do we connect all together? So that shared universal connection is to me kind of very linked to this telepathic argument. But the more ego we put in there, I feel, at least for me, the less kind of connected I feel somehow.
Can I share something concerning that? It's really beautiful. Hello. That's all right, yeah. It's really beautiful that you brought up the whole thing with the simulation, because one of the indigenous truths is that the world is relating to you as you relate to it. it's a very erotic relationship we have. You know, we have concepts like chairs, and you think that's something where I have to sit, but then your need to sit manifests chairs. It's really something where you are helping the creator render. You are a creator as well. Fragmented part of the conscious, which is also articulating its own physical, spiritual, and social needs. So if we're talking about sharing mystical practices, I'd like to share one if you're up for it. And it's super effective, and it's absolutely amazing. And I think we should get a little bit closer, because, you know, if you're going to share anything, you know, special, you should give it reverence. And it is absolutely simple, it is brilliant, and it is completely underestimated. Because we've been speaking this whole time about, you know, meditation mostly, like you're going into yourself, disconnecting, But then Stan, you brought up this thing, you know, it's like connect with the outside. Magical practice is to listen. Because there's layers upon layers upon layers of information. As you mentioned, sometimes you're getting signals. Like the indigenous people, you ask them a question. Before they answer, they will listen. What do you hear outside? A moment of stillness in the city? Perhaps someone else wants to listen in on the conversation? Are you making sense of those signals? Perhaps some of those signals are emerging from within you. Perhaps they're not even coming from outside.
So the awareness is what's really important there, right? So when you're in that present space, what you're often waiting for is the signal. And the signal is going to be some kind of outward interruption. So the interruptions are not just interruptions. they're guides towards the synchronicity. And there's the food. Yeah, but isn't that funny? But the signal was, they come out, right? And then that breaks the field. And then, but it's very interesting. The problem with it is like you can really go down such a rabbit hole with it all, where you're like, what is real, what is not real, what is in my field, what is out of my field, what is the meaning of something versus not the meaning of something. What do I need to pay attention to? Right. And so but I think the only thing you can do is approach it with a level of just exploration and fun.
And curiosity.
Yeah, and curiosity. That's the word I was looking for, because otherwise it can become overwhelming. And this sense that like you guiding yourself towards flow states and then everything is going to be okay. I actually find it usually is, but I worry a lot about that works up until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, what are you going to then do about that? You get sick, or you have an accident, or you have some sort of thing. So it's also a dangerous fallacy to kind of think that from my experience over the last couple of years, it's guided me more towards abundance, financial abundance, less stress, the ability to create better things. Like this hub has been as much for me an energetic work as it has been a physical work. For my team, it's been more of a physical work. But for me, it's mostly been about the energetics, which are hard for me to learn. And then I'm going to say something ironic because I'm hogging the mic, but learning how to physically hold space, which is something that women have done for a long time. Women have been good at holding space. One of the things I'm trying hard is to learn how to energetically hold space. And I've realized it's much more work to hold space than it is to talk. And it's also a source of greater power. It's speaking as a weakness in this world. Holding space and energetically contributing your darshan, which is a concept we can discuss, towards the concept and being able to mentally shift the conversation is where the real power is. So.
The microphone is the talking stick. I just wanted to share one thing about listening, because I think listening is lacking in our world and in these spaces where we're talking about climate and how to meet the times that we're in collaboratively. Yeah, and one of the, I've been working with this acronym WAIT, which stands for Why Am I Talking? And it's so I invite you all to bring that into your awareness, because a lot of what we choose to share, I think, is subtly coming from a place of feeling like we need to prove ourselves or we want to be seen or heard. So yeah, I don't feel that we're going to get to where we all want to go without learning to listen.
I will follow up the weight one, which I like, with another one of my favorites, which is my perception and view is a reflection of me. I hear it all the time. It's a really cool one. And in terms of listening, I think that holding space is a form of energetic listening, right? Just feeling around you, and like there's confidence built when you start to realize that saying nothing is louder than saying something. And you look like, I sit in rooms for hours and just stare at people, honestly. And people come up to me and just say the wildest things because I literally just sit there and just observe all the time. I used to spend 2 weeks at a time when I was a kid and just walk around and communicate nothing to people. And it really messes with people when you do that in a space where people are always talking. So there's a lot of power in literally just like observing, because I think your awareness is expanded when you're not talking or staring or whatever. And then answer to you was what I did in my meditation. It's the same every time for me. Since I was a kid, I always pray and I always ask for service, to be in service. And then the third thing is I try to match my frequency with the room. And after that, I shut up. I try not to think anything for the next 10 minutes. I try to enter a space of like literally nothingness. And then in that, I can be reactionary towards the energy in the room.
Hi, my name is Lucy. Sorry for coming very late. But yeah, just want to give an example about listening. I'm a filmmaker and I spent some time with an Aboriginal woman in Australia and went out for lunch with her and she invited her friend. And my thing is just constantly bombarding people with questions because it's just, I guess, my thing about making films. And that's what I did with her friend. And I thought it was all fine. And then when I walked out, she said that that was incredibly rude. And in our culture, we don't look into each other's eyes and we don't ask questions. We just be. And that really was totally resonates with like, why we keep talking? Yeah, exactly. And also when they go foraging, they never ask questions. When they teach their children how to go foraging, they just teach in silence because the answers will come to you by yourself. You don't have to ask the whole time. So it's just, going into your inner space and just listening what drops into your head.
I think, so one of the things that I've been feeling over the last 2 weeks here being in COP, being extremely exhausting, being energizing in many ways at the same time, and going back to a lot of the points that we made at the beginning around the good, the bad, the COP, why are we here and so on, I feel an extreme sympathy, fascination sometimes, but also compassion with what the people at the highest political level are trying to achieve now. I mean, the task is tremendously complex. And yesterday night I've talked with one of the delegates who was a friend of mine, and looked into him exhausted, but at the bottom, a zombie, and saying, I'm exhausted. I'm completely exhausted, and knowing this is part of the negotiations. And if we're talking quite a bit what it means to negotiate, right, on behalf of many million people and interest and so on. So beyond all that, I think the appreciation and trying to create unity with the people that are, I think, most of them trying their absolute best to reach something that brings humanity forward together with the immense task, complex task of achieving unity in a very diverse world. It's very fascinating to me, and I think talking about listening or connecting to what they're probably all going through with us, I think sending a message of light and hope and compassion is extremely, extremely important, and not alienating, the side events, the COP, the outside, the real world outside, inside, and so on. I think this is important.
I talk too much, and I remember this WAIT acronym, which is powerful, something that came to me over and over and over again. There are different negotiators, different parties, different priorities. In India, they have a set of challenges with sanitation, water, healthcare, and then Western developed world has different situation, different priorities. And I actually realized that we do not have the shared understanding of reality, because the guys from Palestine, they blame Israel. The Israel blames Palestine. They have Pakistan and India, two English-speaking countries. They don't have any trade. They do trade via, Dubai. They have still, state of war over Kashmir. So the point is about the shared state of the reality. And when you account for incentives of media, attention economy, the Facebook algorithm, and when I am outraged, I am a great customer because I spend time on the website and I am clicking the links, they are harvesting my attention. And now what I'll say is a little bit controversial, a little bit crazy, but I stand by this. Bitcoin solves that. That across, you can be Hindu, Muslim, Christian, any sorts of religion, any sorts of country, any sorts of belief, we can agree on the state of the blockchain. So this is a big building block of in the entire history of civilizations, in the entire history of humanity, history of consciousness, history of thought, to be able to agree on the consensual state of the reality. It is something majestic. For the first time in the human history, we can agree that white is white, and there is beyond reasonable doubt, there is absolutely no way to dispute it, and this is like, I call it a Bitcoin consciousness and Bitcoin becoming a new religion.
I'd like to, it's related to what a lot has been said in the last minutes, but I think it's very important to recognize our own biases. Like, I don't know if you're familiar, you probably are, with Vipassana meditation, that you're supposed to, you know, observe, which is what you're saying, without judging, and delaying that reaction, and finding where that difference is between the objective and the subjective, and where perhaps like your triggers are, and thus your biases as well, because sometimes we tend to have interpretations, and not only in the climate change or forests or indigenous peoples related work, but like in our everyday life. But if we put it into the perspective of, okay, like the whole COP context, there's a lot of interpretations that are very well intended about what needs to be done. But then, you know, like who gave, for example, like me as a scientist, who gave me the legitimacy that my solution is the legitimate one, you know? Like there's all of these other interpretations. So I think that also ties back to that humility factor that was being talked about earlier today. But yeah, I think it all ties back to meditation and self-knowledge in the end.
I'm going to add a funny point, because we brought up blockchain, because I like these two linking, and this is a new thing that I've heard recently, which is blockchain's like I was saying, like kind of like a technological trust system we've built. And what's interesting with biases is it's kind of hard for me to know her bias unless she speaks and stuff like that. But with data, when data is biased, when maybe the data is only tracked males over 40 that are white, we can look at that and be like, this data structure is biased, and we can change that. So that's why it's interesting with blockchain. We're going to actually be able to observe the actual biases we are tracking and balance it out. And that's where I think this like trust factor is going to be really significant in the way that we like can work together, because now we can actually like build a trust model that's super transparent and be like, oh my God, this data is really biased. No wonder we're only seeing these ads. So I think it's going to be really, I agree with you. I don't think it's as controversial as you think. The power that blockchain can have on being like unifying us all together or whatever.
I said a signal has arrived. Can you just pull a chair in? I think we're going to do our Jedi session now. So, Jedi Mystery School is now closed. We absolutely can, yes. And then we're going to segue into a different type of Jedi. How do you guys want to close this? Well, before we close, is there anything that anyone would like to say? Or shall we wait?
Everyone's awesome.
Can I share one thing?
Yeah.
I'm working on a project right now, and I'm actually a part of the Design Science Studio this year. And I'm part of this program, and I'm exploring all different threads for this project, and I'm wanting to, this is just an open question to all of you, but I'm wanting to explore what regeneration means in the realm of human relationships and regenerative relating, because what I've observed and experienced is that, I think, comes back to the listening piece, but a lot of times we're talking about regeneration and visioning, but there's still not the level of kind of like connection and flow that's possible in relationships. And so I'm interested in like truth telling and how we come back into coherence and how we, presence when there's disconnection, or presence when we're not able to be present with what's happening. So those are just some threads I'm exploring, and I really would love your feedback.
Right now, or?
No, after.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Before we close, I think what we'll do is Sophia Swire is here from a different type of Jedi. And we're going to talk about women and investing. So for those of you on the live stream, stay tuned for that. At 1 o'clock, we're going to go to the Great Unknown, which will actually be a wonderful kind of segue into Burning Man, because Sophia made a film about Burning Man. We're going to close this out. When we close this out, we're all going to get some lunch. Let's just come back here to circle, and then we'll have Sophia's session over food. Okay, and then hi.
So I love that he did this, because we're tracking for the normal way we usually close out our councils, and I'm saying we're probably going to do the latter versus the former, is usually we've always ended on gratitude circle. That takes a while. And then the last thing we do is sound. We always break our circles with some form of sound collectively, because we think it harmonizes. So that's just a tip for the next time. Like, always love ending on gratitude, because it brings presence to the moment we're having and reflection on the moment we just had. So that's just for the next time, but I'm down for sound.
Let's do telepathic gratitude.
Yes.
And why don't you incorporate a group sound into whatever you're going to create? Then we can have it all.
Boom. Very good. So, the underlying idea is that we can express the music and vibration much more than we can through words. The idea here is quite simple. We can relate ideas to a vibration. We can also extract ideas, complex thoughts from that same vibration. Best example, say this note right here is supposed to be 520 hertz, the love frequency. I can't corroborate, but it's nice to pretend. It sounds good. So my idea is that if we can get to resonate on that frequency before we close, it can be any interpretation of that sound. You like, and you try to integrate that into yourself, try to put those thoughts in that frequency. You can carry everything that has been spoken here, everything that has been spelled, everything that has been felt, everything that has been cast as word spells, which has affected our realities. And all you need to do is remember that. Because we are infinitely grateful for the space created, held, shared. The last expression of that sound can be imbued deep with gratitude.
the Damanhurians, who we spent time with before we opened the hub, believe that sound and symbol and frequency and meaning are imbued in everything. And it's sort of this idea that everything is sacred, but specifically they've developed their own language based on their own symbols and their own sounds. And for me, this has been one of my big questions over the last year, because I became a Reiki master during the pandemic, and learning those symbols and how they turn on and off energy has been really amazing. But there are mysteries within mysteries, and so one of the main reason I went to Damanhur with Lucian was to just begin to try to understand and unravel the mystery between symbol and sound, coherence, and how they turn on or amplify energy, or how symbols have their own frequency for energy. So it's very interesting from a language standpoint, it's very interesting from a writing standpoint, and it's also very interesting from a manifestation standpoint. So the words you say, the things you write, have incredible depth at the energetic field beyond the way that we think they do. That's why it's so important to speak your truth. That's why it's so important to write as a form of manifestation in your dream journal or your diary or whatever else, because these things carry frequency and power. And so we'll see, every tone, ah, eh, o, u, every heart sound, k, they carry frequency. Thank you for taking the summary notes and putting it into a string and then putting it inside of us. That was new. Well, yeah. Let's eat. Okay, and then I'm going to introduce Sophia Swire from Jedi, and you're going to tell us all about it, and we're going to have a session on women and investing. Thanks for making it. You arrived at exactly the right moment. Let's get some food.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just like trying to put together a PowerPoint in like 2 minutes. You're gonna kill it.
That's my phone.
going to happen.
Hi.
How are you, Jen?
I'm good.
Welcome to Glasgow.
Thank you.
This is my lovely audio lady, Sena.
Hi. Nice to meet
And
you.
I'll get Sarabi. So you're starting now, right?
No, and well, I guess now, but I think he just reset the schedule.
Are you ready?
So we're eating, and then we're doing Sophia's, and then me.
Do you want to be filmed?
Not yet.
Not now, but like
Yeah.
when you're on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm making a.
Hold on.
I'm making a slideshow just for us right now.
This is my friend and colleague from Barcelona, Sarabi. Sarabi, this is Jen.
Hi.
Burning Man lady. Have you guys met already?
Yeah, well, kind of. On the thread, I guess. Sorry, I'm slightly distracted.
That's okay.
No, it's okay.
Jen's
No, I have to
doing
do
a-
that next.
Oh, good. Jen's doing a presentation soon.
I know I'm writing it right now, so.
Okay, Yeah. maybe we should. Yeah, you really need to.
Thank you.
stand.
So Burning Man, huh?
That's right.
Sweet. That'll be fun.
Have you been before?
No, funny enough, but I have designed and run multiple mini Burning Man festivals.
Oh, I'd love to ask you more about that after this.
Yeah.
Cultural offshoots, per se?
No, we did a bunch of festivals during COVID because there was no festivals.
Right.
Ranging from 50 to 100 people on 100 acres, and we completely developed out like the space, and it was sick as fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm a little distracted right
No, you're
now,
fine.
but let me chat to you after. What was your name again?
Nikolai.
Nikolai. Cool.
We'll have plenty of time.
Yeah. Who's good at editing? Are you good at editing?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, how do I put a text box right here? And then how do I delete all the shit in the background so it's just this graphic?
Text box.
Right. speaking of which, I need you to come help me put these slides together really quickly. Can you help me dump the last few pictures from the trip in there? I heard you, I heard you. Can we just focus on one thing at a time, and then we'll do that? I just need you to get the images from New York trip. New York trip. Any image we have from New York together. And then one picture from Dubai, and one picture from Damanhur.
You need a picture for each.
Yeah, and then we're here now. Then Glasgow.
Can I email them to you?
Yeah.
Hey, did you ever get all the photos that I downloaded to you?
Hang on.
You did.
I'm writing talking points for you. Okay, and then we close on. Okay.
Did you go to the shed?
Wait one second. No, I didn't. But you can add it in. Send it to me. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Let me share. boy. What a day. Well, I do need you to do this, but you don't have it on the screen. Send it to me. presentation so fast.
I just photobombed that photo. Yeah. Yeah. We're in kind of a resonant field today. It's sort of the last day of COP. I believe the live stream is back on, or it's been on the whole time. We're running a little bit behind, so what we're gonna do now is ask you to grab a seat and focus in on a conversation about women and investing with my friend Sophia Swire. For those of you watching on the live stream, we just had a lunch break following Jedi Mystery School. From this, we're gonna go into a conversation with Jen Sander on co-creating future societies. But before we do that, half of the future society is actually 55% of the future society is women.
55%? I thought
Yeah.
it was 52%.
Well, I guess maybe the numbers changed a little, but generally women do outnumber men because they live longer. You, Sophia, are a woman, you're a friend, you're a filmmaker, you're a funder and investor. You are many things. And I thought it would be fun to bring you up as we transition from Jedi Mystery School through Jedi and women into the future and our upgame by way of Burning Man. Such an interesting thing. And you're a very interesting point because you have made a film about Burning Man and you're doing incredible work in Afghanistan and you're doing incredible work with women. So can you just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me today. And Stan, you're a part of my journey, and I'm very grateful for that. I suppose I have a slightly maverick background. As you say, I have an interest in art and architecture, creativity, and fashion, philanthropy, finance, and so on. I think as a woman, maybe, certainly in my vintage, we were given permission to express who and what we wanted to be because there was less of an expectation back in the day that the woman would be a primary financial provider. So I had a very sort of liberal artsy type background, and I'm actually 3/4 Scottish. I was, the first school I went to was up the road in Bears Den, and I had a broad Glaswegian accent when I was...
Oh, the Glasgow liked that. Had a little cathedral sound there.
So I had a broad Glaswegian accent when I was 10, 11 years old, living up here. And my family are actually, my mother's family are from just outside Glasgow. I was staying with my aunt last night.
So this is something of a homecoming for you.
It is actually, very much so, yeah. And it's much too cold for my liking. My blood has become very thin over the years. I've spent too much time in California and Afghanistan, I think. So there wasn't the expectation that I should become a financial provider, either for myself or for my family. But then when I left university, I went into finance because I thought, even though we're talking the 80s, it's way back when, I was one of 3 women in a dealing room floor of 500 men. And I just felt that in order to be a fully functioning adult, independent of men, and able to sort of survive regardless of what life threw at me, it would make sense to become financially literate. So I spent 3 years in the city, and then my heart and soul were not being answered by buying and selling large quantities of oil and gas companies, which is what I was focusing on at the time. So I decided to go off to the Hindu Kush to set up schools for girls. And I did that for 10 years. We set up about 250 of them. And that year that I spent in the Hindu Kush, in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, the inspiration for Rudyard Kipling's book, A Man Who Would Be King, was often mistaken for Shangri-La, this beautiful place. That year in heaven changed my life.
How old were you when you went to the Hindu Kush?
Well, I actually spent my 25th birthday there, and I fell in love. I had one of those spiritual experiences, you know, one of those transcendental experiences that you sometimes have when you melt into nature around you. And this is where the British discovered polo in the 1880s. So they were playing one of the original atavistic, no-rules games, completely out of, you know, not at all like Smith's Lawn. There were guys riding each other off, no helmets, no face guards. They were banging each other on the head with mallets. It was completely wild. And it was being played out in this very raw landscape, very, very green valley, this beautiful blue aquamarine river snaking through these cypress trees, marching up and down this serpentine river, and then this sheer shard of granite rock reaching 25,000 foot all around.
Wow.
And there was a searchlight. As the sun went down, there was this sort of torchlight dancing around on the polo field. And I thought, I found my spiritual home. I'm going to be living here. And I did. I spent a year there.
Building schools for girls.
Yeah.
What happened next?
Well, I learnt really firsthand the power of, the transformative power of education if you educate girls. So this is something that I learnt sort of on the job, so to speak. The school was for boys and girls, and we educated the children in their national curriculum, but we also, because I wasn't a trained teacher and I had certain interests, such as I was interested at the time in things like deforestation and animal conservation, there were a number of snow leopard families that were living in the valley at the time, and the farmers who knew no better would shoot them. So they would tether goats, the snow leopard would come down in the middle of the night, and the farmers would shoot them because they were killing off the livestock. So we educated the girls and the boys to train their parents not to kill off these spectacularly beautiful endangered animals, and we trained them also to stop cutting down the trees for firewood. And I went back a number of years later, and I found that many of these deforested hillsides had now been reforested, and there were a number of snow leopard families living untouched, and there were sort of World Wildlife posters all up and down the main street in the bazaar, basically urging people to protect wildlife. And I felt so proud at that moment, because I realized that those little seeds that we planted all those years ago had come to fruition. Also, when I arrived there, age 25, the female literacy rate was about 2.7%. The only women who were educated locally were the members of the royal family, and they were not allowed to work and they were not allowed to teach. So there were no resources really for young girls, and those girls obviously were not then learning to be doctors and teachers and nurses themselves. And as a result of that, it had one of the highest infant and maternity mortality rates in the world. 30 years later, the literacy rate is now over 40%, and the infant and maternal mortality rates are in line with the rest of the country. It's still way too high, but...
But a transformation nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I understand when people now talk about, you know, how you must educate girls. Well, those reports actually first came out in the 80s, those first UN reports saying you have to prioritize the education of girls, because it's the silver bullet for so many other things as well.
Okay. So you started in finance, you went to education, you lived in the Hindu